Coming up on today's edition of Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about, our guest is Michelle Schroeder. She's a licensed real estate broker and realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services and serves the Chicagoland area.
And we love chatting with Michelle because she's just not any realtor. She has so much more to offer.
She knows Chicago like the back of her hand, and we want to dive into her knowledge and expertise on getting investment properties and doing some different renovations.
Yeah, we've all seen the HGTV. There's so many episodes out there. I can't wait to dig in and talk to you about Michelle. And we know that you have expertise in investments, like first-time investments in real estate, and we want to dig into how we can get that first real estate piece under our belt to be an investor.
So we are very excited to dive in. Let's get started.
Steinem once said, "We will never solve the feminization of power until we solve the masculinity of wealth." Barbara Provost and Maggie Nielsen are the team at Purse Strings that will help you navigate the ins and outs of financial independence so that you can be financially fearless. This is Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about.
This topic on buying and selling and renovations of homes is so important because real estate is a fantastic investment. Before we dive into all of that, welcome, Michelle. We're all eager to hear from you and your expertise. So before we dive in, can you share a little who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Thrilled to be here. I love the Purse Strings network and family and what it provides for women and financial fearlessness. My name is Michelle Schroeder. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Chicago, and myself and my business partner, Britton Shutters, we have a team called the Going Beyond Group, and we are called the Going Beyond Group because we truly go beyond the transaction. We want to provide a really high level of understanding and commitment to our clients. And we understand that real estate is one of the largest transactions anyone's ever going to make in their life. So it's not a transaction-based relationship for us. It's definitely holistic. We want you to be a client, and we want to be a trusted partner for life. So once you've purchased, we want to be able to be a resource for you with our contractors, with our trusted vendors and advisors, CPAs, all the folks that help you keep your real estate investment healthy. So excited to be here today and talk about investment properties.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited to have you.
I know. We've been so looking forward to dig into this because it's a topic that, real estate can seem scary in terms of an investment. It's not like, you just go to a bank and put your money in and gain interest. It can be what I think is a big step. And so we're glad you're here today to break it all down. And so, Michelle, can you start out? Let's say you're working with a new client who's new to investing and wants to start investing in real estate. How do you get started?
Well, first we start with a buyer consultation. So regardless of what type of property you're looking to purchase, where it is in the city, what your price point is, we want you to have an understanding of what the process is. And truly, talking to a realtor, talking to myself, my team, really should be step one. Your very next step is, of course, going to be talking to a mortgage professional, figuring out the financing part. But we want to make sure that you understand what is ahead. I think sometimes with real estate being at everyone's fingertips, it's really easy to be scrolling, going to open houses, maybe using an online mortgage calculator to try and figure things out. But that's going to give you a false sense of security, and it's not going to help you analyze the market. So even if you are calculating what you think you could purchase, you're not going to know if it's really going to be achieving your goals unless you discuss those goals with a realtor. So we really do want to focus in on what are your goals. Someone who's going to buy a property and own it for 5 to 10 years is going to have different strategic goals than someone who's going to buy a property and hold on to it for 30 plus years. Someone who's going to buy a property and wants it to be turnkey. Some investment properties are turnkey where you purchase them and immediately you can move a tenant into it. And that's really all you have to do is start collecting rent and no renovations needed. Whereas someone who's buying a renovation project, they have a lot more calculations and lead time, and there's different things to consider on both ends. Both work. No, neither one is better than the other. It just, again, it needs to align with your goals and what's going on in your life.
Got it. I think the hardest part, I think in my mind to get started is, let's say you already live in a home and you have a mortgage, and now you want to buy an investment property, let's say for someone to rent. There's a lot of calculations into the property I already have versus how can I buy another property as well. So are there thumbnail calculations that you go to, or what should people consider when they're looking to buy a second property for an investment?
This is a great question and one that we get often. I do rely heavily on my lender partners just because as they're the one that's issuing the loan, they're going to really have final say in terms of like qualifications. But I think some people are not aware that you can leverage equity that is existing in your current home towards buying an investment property, as well as when you're looking at the qualifications for income, when you're buying specifically multi-unit buildings, you can use the income that you would receive as part of the qualifying income. And actually, you might be able to do that with condos as well, but the lender would really be able to help you look at how that would all fall into place. But you're not just looking at, can you afford the mortgage of this second property? We're also looking at what rent are you going to be collecting and how can we apply that towards your qualifications to purchase that property.
Good to know. I had no idea.
And so if you did something like that, do you already have to have like the renters who they're going to be before you apply for that property? I mean, it seems like what comes first, the chicken or the egg, like the place, do you get the tenants, you apply for the mortgage. How does that kind of lay out? Because I know other people would have like hesitancies on sharing their finances for you to buy a place. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So sometimes you might be looking at buying a property that already has an existing tenant in place. So if you buy that property, you inherit that tenant. Therefore, you inherit that lease and whatever the rental rate is. So you're kind of locked into what that rate is. If you buy a vacant property, you do not have to have a tenant lined up, but we would use market analysis. The appraisal that would happen would use market analysis to figure out what the market value rent of that property would be based on other closed similar properties. So that's how the bank's going to approve it.
Interesting.
Got it. So for someone who's just getting started, do you have a recommendation? Like, should they buy a condo? Should they buy, like you were talking about buying a 3-flat, which, that worked for you. That seems like a much bigger investment. So what are your suggestions for dipping your toe in and getting started?
So I do think it comes down to a combination of factors. Obviously, there's the financial qualifications factor. So if we assume for the purpose of this conversation that you qualify for a condo, a 2-unit, a 3-unit, or a 4-unit, let's just say for this comparison, then you have to think about what you're really interested in. Some people are interested in being a landlord and being a landlord that lives in the building and has their tenants living there too. That might be a scenario that you're interested in. If you're not interested in that, then that presents a different course of action. Maybe you want to buy the condo, live in it for a couple years, then rent it out, then you buy your next property, and that's how you start out with buying your first property, and then it turns into an investment property.
Got it.
If you're interested in being a landlord and being a little bit more hands-on, a 2-flat, 3-flat, 4-flat, 2 to 4 units is considered residential in Chicagoland. So those are the size buildings that you can buy with residential loans. And it really comes down to the numbers. Personally, a 3 to 4 unit building is going to have much better numbers and be in your favor quicker than a 2-unit building. Because, in a 2-unit building, especially if you're living in it, you're only sharing the mortgage with one rent. If you go to a 3-unit, you're sharing the mortgage with 2 rents and so on. So the more tenants you have, the less risk you have of vacancy, because if you have vacancy on a 2-unit building, that's 100% vacancy.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have one unit that's vacant in a 3-unit building, that's only 50%. So the numbers get better the more units you have, but it's also more work. There's a little bit more maintenance. There's more appliances, more bills that you have to calculate for. However, in the long run, it could be better overall picture for you because your monthly payment is going to be very low, if anything at all. I actually have a great example of this. I had a client a couple years back who wanted to actually originally purchase either a condo or a small single family home. We were talking about the numbers and, she wanted to be very conservative, which I think is a great approach for first time buyers. You definitely want to have a home that you're comfortable in, but I do think that the internet and HGTV and TV shows that are out there, they set unrealistic expectations on first-time buyers that your first home or any home that you own has to be your dream home. That's not the case at all. It was called a starter home back in the day for a reason. It was your starter home. It was the first one. You're starting out. It's a stepping stone. It's not meant to be the end-all be-all. It's not meant to be the most. And actually, maybe you're not going to have all of the boxes checked on this first home, but it's okay. It's financially better, in my opinion, than renting because you're gaining equity. You're putting in money that you're going to see a return on. Rent, you're not going to see a return on. So even if that starter home doesn't tick all the boxes and you think, oh, well, I'm only going to be happy here 3 to 5 years, that is okay. It's still a great financial tool that you can leverage. So this client was considering a condo or single family home. We're looking at the monthly payments. She's wanting to be conservative. And there really was very low inventory. And I suggested, have you considered a multi-unit building? And at first she said, I've always thought about a 2-flat. I was renting in a 2-flat back in the day in Logan Square, and I had great landlords, and they lived, upstairs, and I lived on the first floor, and it was a great scenario, and I could imagine myself doing that. So we started down the road of multi-unit buildings. And then I suggested, well, have you actually considered a 3 or 4-unit building? And that seemed overwhelming to her at first. But I explained the numbers. And once she saw the numbers and the breakdown of, okay, here's a 2-unit building, a 3-unit building, and a 4-unit building. And even though the 3 and 4-unit buildings cost more to purchase, what she was going to be paying out of pocket on a monthly basis was very, very little, if anything at all. And that alone, that monthly savings, has not only, she ended up going that route. She ended up going with a 3-unit building. And it's allowed her to put so much money into other investment forms over the past couple years. She actually just called me the other day and said, Michelle, I'm ready to buy my next property. We took a look at the numbers. She's got almost 50% equity in her property in only 4 years because she's been putting money that she didn't that she had extra. She's been putting towards principal only. So her tenants are paying her mortgage. And then she's taking her savings and diversifying it, doing whatever she does. I'm sure she has a portfolio, different investments, but some money she's putting towards principal only. And even if you only do that once or twice a year with your real estate investments, you can shave years off of the life of your loan, and you get to your equity, quicker because you're paying towards principal. So now she's ready to purchase her next property. She's going to leverage the equity that she has in her first property, and she's going to hold on to her first property and have a fully functional investment property that's got 3 tenants, and she'll cash flow each month. So that's really exciting.
Wow. So who's managing all this real estate for her?
She is. So currently she lives in the 3-unit building. So she's got 2 tenants. When she moves out, she'll have a 3rd tenant. And she happens to be someone who was up for the task, she is an attorney. So, maybe it's because of her profession, maybe it's just because of who she is or her, having had the good experience previously of having a landlord that lived in the same building, but she was up for it. And, you know, if you have great tenants, you don't really need much management. And also, if you start out the relationship with the tenants with a very clean, functional property, you're not going to have problematic tenants. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need to do screening and pick the right person. And, of course, there's risks because you could always have someone that, for whatever reason, loses their job or starts, not being able to pay rent or whatever. Of course, there's risk. But outside of that, I think that tenants get kind of a bad rap when people are thinking about investment properties. Oh, all they do is call and complain, and well, they only call and complain if there's water leaking in from their roof or the plumbing isn't working, or if you give them a functional space, it doesn't have to be designer, but just make sure it's working. Make sure it's something that you would live in. That's generally my guiding rule that I tell my clients is like, you don't want to buy something and be so focused on the numbers that you're exploiting your tenant. Give them a nice place to call home, and it'll be a mutually beneficial situation.
Right.
I'm just thinking of this place I recently, lived in the past couple of years, and like the tenant did own, or the owner was the guy who lived on the first floor, and then there were two other levels, and he did like some kind of construction, so he was pretty handy as it was. But yeah, like I was always felt really assured because I was like, well, if there's any problem, like I know exactly where he lives, like the same address, but everything was done really nicely. And it seemed like, I knew it was his place, he knew it was his place, so we both kind of put that care back into it because we both saw each other, versus sometimes of like these, big companies that are eating up these properties that, no one there cares, and it is a piece of crap. And it's just like, well, yeah, that's why they're calling you all the time. And so, but it starts off bad. You can get that from the get-go, where he was like, welcome to the town, like, this is my place, really relaxed, doors unlocked, like, help yourself. It was like, all right, cool. And it was a really good experience just as a tenant as well, just knowing, we're both in it. It's his place, and I could tell that he cares, and so I wanted to care more. And it was really nice having someone local kind of own the place versus a big head honcho.
Well, and that's a great point. I do make the distinction to people often, whether you're buying an investment property or just an owner-occupied property, real estate is a hands-on endeavor. There are some investments, and you guys have had some great purse string folks that have come on. There are different ways to invest where it is 100% hands off. You're putting the money into a system, and the system has its rate of return, and that's it. With real estate, there is a level of hands on, and I know that you can hire property management companies. I know that you can technically, be hands off, but you have to care for the property in order for it to maintain its value. You cannot forget about the property completely. You can't buy it, do nothing to it, and then sell it 30 years later and have a huge return. That's just not...
What do you mean, Michelle? Everyone wants it with yellow peeling walls and old bathrooms. Those are my favorite ones to buy.
I hate to break it to you. Now, they have a great value add opportunity, which is also something I think could be great to talk about today, is how do you identify when a value add opportunity is the right fit?
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of houses out there that need fixing up. And I'm sure we've all seen them. We scroll through the photos and we're thinking to ourselves, oh my gosh, this property is horrible. Like, I can't even imagine what it would look like if it was all fixed up. That is one piece that I can really help my clients with. I have a degree in scenic design. So as a scenic designer, my role was always to design the set and then bring to life the vision of the director. So in the same way, when my client describes the type of property that they want to live in, their aesthetic, their styles, etc., I'm looking for properties that we can bring to life that'll fit what my client wants to do. So it's a really fun, creative outlet for me because when I walk into a space, I can easily, like with my mind, erase the walls or change the colors or see things disappear, see things appear. So, and I have great power partners that help bring that vision to life as well. Designers, contractors, lots of vendors that, make the process from, okay, I've bought a property that needs fixing up to, okay, now I have a property that's been renovated, a much easier path. I'm sure we've all experienced trying to go onto Google to look for a business or a recommendation. Even if you just need a plumber or an electrician, it can be so challenging. There's so many ads, so many results. Who do you trust? We've already been down that road. We've already vetted and worked with the folks that we work with all the time. So it's a trusted relationship. And, GCs, contractors, it's a tough industry. They're pulled in a million directions, so we can also kind of help focus them.
Purse Strings offers an available for hire network of vetted professionals who specialize in serving women. When you have a life event that has suddenly made money a priority, you can now move forward with a whole new confidence that you're getting advice and services from savvy professionals who are uniquely equipped to serve your needs. Go to pursestrings.co and use our directory of handpicked financial professionals when you're ready to plan for retirement, navigate divorce, buy your next home, fire up your new business, and more. Go to pursestrings.co or check the link in the show notes. Now you can be financially fearless.
I am always envious of anyone who can look at the room and take down the walls or, see the different vision. That's one of the things that my logistical mind cannot do for me. But so if someone's looking at a property and they know they have the capacity to do some renovations or thinking of doing that in the future, are there any things where you're we're gonna say no to that renovation or that kind of project? Those are always bigger, more harder versus other things where you're yep, this is easy. We can get this done.
What projects you'd want to get into is going to come back to your personal preference. What do you have capacity for? Some people only have capacity for very surface level painting, tile, nothing structural, and that's perfectly fine. And that will dictate the approach that we take. On the other hand, if you're really wanting to get into it and you're really wanting to see a big return, let's say you want to do a gut renovation. My husband and I did a gut renovation on our 3-unit building in Berwyn. We took it down to the studs.
All 3 floors? All 3 floors? All
3 floors down to the studs, dug out the basement. It was a big renovation.
Yeah.
But we've seen a great return, and everyone's living in a really nice, clean, solid unit that we know will serve us for years to come. You really have to dial in the numbers. So if you're going to go that route, you need to be conservative. So we're going to look at a couple of things. What is the value of the property now? And what is the ARV? The ARV is the after repaired value. It's important for you as the purchaser to understand that. It's also important for the bank to understand that, because the bank is going to lend you money based on what the after repaired value of the property is. And you need to be conservative when you're looking at these numbers. It's easy to want to cherry pick and say, oh, well, I'll buy this property and I'll put X amount into it and it'll be worth, $1 million. You want to be conservative, because if it is higher, then that's great. It's a bonus. But what would be worse is to assume that it's going to be higher and then it's really worth less. So you have to be conservative. You have to really look at the numbers. The great part is that we've been through so many renovations, and I have so many GCs that I work with. They can help estimate the numbers up front. Before you go under contract, before you're signing any paperwork, we can really dial in the numbers prior to starting any work, prior to purchasing.
So can we talk a little bit about how you went about assessing this building that you purchased and assessing the renovation budget with it, and then kind of how did that turn out in the end?
Absolutely. So we purchased in 2019. So
Okay.
It was pre-COVID,
Yep.
boom that we saw in the real estate world. But when we first looked at the property, my husband and I both loved it, saw tons of potential, but we both said, at the listed purchase price, the numbers just don't work. They were too close. There was no room for cushion. We didn't feel confident. Couple weeks went by and they did a price drop. They dropped the price like $70,000
Wow.
because I think that they realized that they were overpriced to begin with. And they probably didn't have a ton of interest because the property really did need some work. The basement was in terrible disrepair and there were leaks and the floor wasn't even and it was obvious that there was repairs
Work
needed.
to be done.
So they did the price drop and we were like, well, now the numbers look pretty good. We negotiated a little bit more. We negotiated the seller to pay some closing cost credits and we got our quotes. And it's tempting to go with the contractor that brings you the cheapest quote. But I always recommend, let's say you have 3, a low, a middle, and a high. Most likely you want to go with the middle, maybe the high, but maybe use them to negotiate against each other or try to figure out, a middle ground. But usually the middle of the road person is going to give you some good value and good work. And again, you really need to get quotes from referral sources, not just people online, because it's really easy to get a quote. Are they going to show up for the job? Now, the nice thing about if you want to do a renovation using a renovation loan through a bank, it kind of builds in a little bit of protection for you because the contractor gets paid in increments as the work gets completed. So they can't get the money from the bank for stage 1 of the project until stage 1 of the project is completed. Versus if you hired them outright, oftentimes they ask for, 50% up front and 50% when we finish. The problem with that is there's no incentive for them to come back and stay on a timeline. So we went the renovation loan route and it worked really well for us. We knew that we wanted to focus on the fundamentals. It's very, very easy when you're looking at a renovation budget to find pretty tile and look at vanities and different design elements that are so cool. But we knew what would serve us long term and our tenants long term was focusing on systems, HVAC, plumbing, electrical. We wanted all of that to be like to code, no problems, no worries. We dug up the basement. We put in drain tile. We put in a check valve. So we did all kinds of functional, systematic things that we knew were going to protect the building.
That could save you so much later.
Huh?
That could save you so much later too.
Exactly. Exactly.
Anyone
It's a
can replace a
long-term
vanity,
strategy.
but long term, no one will be calling you because it should be squared away.
Yes. And then we still made it, I mean, come on, scenic design. I want it to look cute. We still picked cute paint colors. We did have a budget for tile, but we found things within our budget that worked. You can make it all work. But I do think that focusing on the numbers for the fundamentals first is important because then you know what you have left over for the pretty stuff. If you focus on the pretty stuff first, then you might run out of money for the fundamentals. Yeah. It's really important to focus on the fundamentals first.
So how long did that project take you?
Well,
I mean, I know COVID hit and then everything was expensive and not coming in.
I think if it had been on a normal schedule, it would have been about a 5 to 6 month process. Time of year also impacts that, but I think that that's what it would have been. It was about 9.5 months, but that's because
Still
COVID,
not bad.
Yeah. Considering it's not bad, but it was definitely longer. It took longer to get inspectors out. Everything took longer. Supplies, all of it. So
Now, how about getting tenants?
getting tenants. So we have had one tenant that's been with us since 2020, and she is fabulous. And we actually, something that we do that I think you guys would love is that we use a program to collect rent and house all of the documents that also allows us to report on people's credit scores if they pay rent on time. So we're boosting our tenants' credit scores. which,
Awesome.
not all landlords do, but
Right.
we've had tenants that have really appreciated that because, sometimes you're a single parent or this is your first time owning some or renting or, you're building your credit or you're, you know, you just need other sources. Like it's hard to have all of your source of your credit score be credit cards and
Right.
Yeah.
loans. Like what if you're someone who pays their rent on time every month? That should count.
Right.
So
Right. Awesome.
yeah. So finding tenants, I always tell people do your due diligence. There's so many different resources out there that will check credit, that will check backgrounds, that will check, employment. But actually call the people. Like if you're the landlord, it's one thing to receive the report and read through it. Call the prospective tenant, have a conversation with them. Actually call, like sometimes the service will do the verification on previous employment and previous housing, but maybe you should also call the previous landlord. Maybe you should also call the employer because you're the one renting to them. Like it's one thing for it to be collected onto a report, but due diligence is part of it. And at the end of the day, it's not the people that make the report or the management company that's going to be in a pickle. It's
Right.
you as the landlord. So I think the best way to do your due diligence is to double check everything.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, if they're going to be living with you and you're sharing the same building, I would want to be able to really just kind of gut check as much as I can before, saying yes, as it is at least a, 12-month commitment and you want to make sure it is a good fit.
Exactly. It's just like your landlord. There was a mutual understanding and respect for the property because he had a presence.
Yeah.
I want to have a presence. I want my tenant, we don't live in the building anymore, but I talk to my tenants all the time. They know that I care about the building. I still do like the gardening and like we care about our building very much.
Yeah.
So, and that's known to them. And I think that because of that, we have a level of respect.
Yeah. That's
That's
awesome.
awesome. Wow.
I have one more question, and that is if you are thinking about selling, I know sometimes, and it depends on the person, is, kind of doing some renovations before selling. Are there any like top renovations where you're like, this is always, not always, but usually a good investment or a good thing to kind of upgrade before selling a house to increase that value?
So when we do our seller consultations, we will go through the property, make any recommendations on minor repairs that should be done no matter what. And then we'll talk about value add opportunities and what an estimate of costs would be. And if you do this, we think we could sell your house for X amount more. And so we'll talk, sometimes people want to do all of it. Sometimes it's like, okay, we only have a budget for one or two things.
Yeah.
So we definitely have a strategy, and it's definitely property and micro market specific. So it's hard to say like
Okay.
everyone should do this, but definitely we will do the comparative market analysis, look at your property, look at the trends in your neighborhood, and tell you what makes sense. Because what makes
Yeah.
sense in one neighborhood might not make the same sense in another neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so we want to prioritize what the buyers that we're going to be attracting are going to be looking for in your location.
I'm thinking about Barb, like how you bought your place and you renovated a good portion of it, but some of those other places in your neighborhood are just so like have never ever been touched that like anything is an upgrade, because it hasn't been touched since the 80s. Where I mean,
Yeah.
your place just looks 18 times better just because you guys put some new paint on the walls. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's a location that a lot of people move into when they retire. So they're there for several years until they really retire. Then, it's a lot of stepping into the 70s and 80s when you walk it through some of these places. But they're good value for the location and the bones of it all. It just needs a lot of updating.
I actually, I find that a lot that there are some of these communities where there is good value, and then you start to have like a couple houses where things get renovated and then others get renovated, and all collectively you're increasing each other's market value because it was a good entry point to purchase the property, which allowed you the budget to put some more money into it. So it's kind of a great ecosystem.
Yeah, it really is. This has been fantastic. It's, we haven't really talked enough about the investment in real estate. And I think when you start, with your like beginner home, I love the idea of, moving into your starter home and using that as your first rental property, and you move on to something else is really a cool way to do it when you think about it. Yeah, it's a venture that seems scary to some, but it seems like you have so much experience and background and processes that you could make it seem somewhat seamless, which is so cool.
Yes, I always tell my clients, you're not alone. Not only do you have me and Britton and our team, you have our years of experience, and we're also going through the process with you. So if you need more information to make your decision, we'll get you the information. If you need other comparisons, if you need to just talk it through again, and we've talked it through a couple times, we'll talk it through however many times you need to make sure that you're prepared. But at the end of the day, it really all comes back to the numbers. What is that monthly payment that you want to pay? If we can find you a couple of different scenarios that work for that monthly payment, then you're in a great position to make a decision based on, your comfort level with being a landlord.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think this really highlights, some of our purse strings approved professionals and how it's not just a transactional sale that, it's like your realtor comes, they sell your house and, hands off, like it's done. It's like, awesome. I can call Michelle when my HVAC breaks and I need to know a guy, like she knows someone, or, even just, prepping, I'm thinking about this, but I'm not quite ready yet. Like, how do I kind of prepare? And to have that just teammate rather than like, oh, they come, they do their job and they leave. It's awesome to have that teammate and that alliance. It's like, okay, they're in it with me, and can help me along the way. And I think that's just such a difference of service, of quality, that we're so happy to be able to promote. But we're just happy it's out there and you're providing that to those customers. It is such an emotional thing. It's your home. But like you said, it's also probably one of the largest purchases you make. And so it's so great to have that alliance there with you. Not just someone who's like, let's sell this thing and move on.
Absolutely. We actually have a home maintenance guide. So I don't know if that's something that anyone would be interested in, but if people are listening or seeing this podcast, then, I'd love to offer that, and just reach out and we'll email it over.
Awesome. Yeah. And we can put a link to that in the chat or in the show notes as well, if you have that, so people can reach out and grab it. This has been great. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on today that you want to make sure is covered?
Oh, I feel like we could just
go on for hours. I know.
But the moral of the story is just reach out. If you're thinking and not sure about any of it, let's have a conversation. It's never too early to start talking about it. So
yeah, I love it. Let's do it. So thank you again, Michelle, for coming on today and sharing your expertise. And we'll talk to everyone again soon, because we got to keep talking about this shit. And so until then, be financially fearless.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.